an hour, and we have Sabrina Crow with us and Nicole Cassette as well. Nicole is our Part C coordinator for the Birth to 3 program, and Sabrina is our educational projects coordinator. I can never remember titles. There's so many titles within the state. And today they're going to walk you through some Birth to 3 information and how it can be applied and linked with home visiting and all of the amazing work that they are doing in that unit of this division. So with that, I will turn it over to Sabrina and Nicole to get us started and present.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Nicole and I are super excited to share all Birth to 3 with you. We love it, and we hope that we can share some useful information with you today. We want to keep this kind of low key, so if you have questions, please raise your hand, put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself if something, no need to wait till the end, but we will have time at the end of this as well to answer any questions that you may have at the end. All right. Nicole, I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay? Maybe.
I will say, if you're talking, Nicole, you're muted.
If you called in by phone, Nicole, it's *6 to unmute.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll keep going.
And Ashley and I are going to watch the chat for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So today we're going to give you just a kind of a brief overview of Birth to 3 and what it is. And when Nicole can talk, she'll join me as well as we start sharing information. So we always want to start with what is our mission. So the overall mission of Part C, so federally, nationally, Part C early intervention builds upon and provides supports and resources to assist family members and caregivers to enhance children's learning and development through everyday learning opportunities. So we have to start talking about what we do with concerning best practice in Birth to 3. And that is the mission for federally for Part C. But within Connecticut, very similar mission, obviously, is that we are looking to strengthen the capacity of Connecticut families to meet the developmental needs and health-related needs of their child, infants and toddlers who have delays or disabilities. We want to work with them and support within their family to enhance their child's development, but as well as connect them with the community, which is where we want to work with you as well. Helping them find resources, helping them find support within their own community while we work on their development too. Referral process. Birth to 3 has a single point of entry in the state of Connecticut. And that single point of entry is 211 Child Development. So a family or anyone really can call 211 and say they have a concern about a child and would like to make a referral to Birth to 3. It's also their point of entry for Help Me Grow and other childhood resources as well. But we're going to focus today on Birth to 3. So if you have a concern, anyone can call. That being said, for that referral to go through and be active, the parent must also give consent. So if a child care provider, a grandparent, a neighbor, a family friend, anyone can make those referrals, a pediatrician, but then Child Development, 211 would then call the parent to get their consent for the referral to go forward. So we must have a parent consent, but again, it can go through by anyone, and there are multiple ways to do that. You can go through 211, the 800 number that is on your screen, through our website, or there's also the faxing referral form to 211 as well. And the information they're gathering from you is what your concerns are. They want to know what prompted that call, so they'll kind of go through the ages and stages screening with you, or whoever is calling with if it's the parent, to find out what their concerns are. But they would then ask more questions regarding not just their concern, but other areas of development as well, to make sure that we're getting a good picture of what we would need to be looking for when that referral comes to the Birth to 3 programs. So once that referral comes through, families have a choice of programs. There's at least 2 programs per town for birth to 3. If a family has a request for a specific program, they can request that program directly and that referral would be sent to them. So typically it would be, Ashley, can you do me a favor and text Nicole? She's having issues, just while I continue.
Yes.
Thank you. Connecting, she's not hearing us. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So the family can request a certain birth to 3 program. If they have, so say their previous child went through birth to 3 and they want to stay with that same program, they can do that. Otherwise, it's a rotation process. So if they have no preference, whoever is next in rotation in that town would receive the referral and it's electronically sent to that program. And then it's the program's responsibility for reaching out to the family to schedule and moving forward with that initial evaluation. So the initial evaluation can take place in a home, it can take place in a community setting, it can take place at a child care center. I've done evaluations at McDonald's, I've done them at parks, at libraries, at child care centers, and most often in the home as well. Currently, we're doing a lot of remote evaluations due to COVID, so that is something that we have had to adapt to over the last year and a half. But that we are, I think we're doing pretty well with. Obviously, we want to get back in person where we can see the family and support them in person, face to face. But we do have that remote option currently as well. The initial evaluation typically takes place it takes about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on the age of the child, the concerns, the different areas of development we need to assess and evaluate. But we talk, it's a lot of parent report as well, but then specific tasks with the child. So the evaluators would bring in a bag of assessment tools to use for developmental evaluation, and we're looking at all areas of concern. Specifically the area the family is concerned about, but all areas. So those areas being their adaptive skills, so their self-help, their dressing, their feeding. We would look at their cognitive skills, so their problem solving, their memory, some vision as well in that point. We would look at their communication skills, so expressive and receptive skills. We would look at their, let me backtrack, receptive being what they're understanding, as well as how they're expressing themselves, whether it's through gestures or sounds or words. We're also evaluating their social skills, so how they're interacting with adults, familiar adults, how they're interacting with other children depending on their age, and also kind of their own self-concept, who they are as a person. And we're looking at motor skills. So the motor skills being their fine motor skills, how they're using their hands, pointing, eye-hand coordination, some visual perceptual stuff as well, like stacking blocks. And then we're looking at the gross motor movement. So they're big motor movements. So running, walking, sitting, climbing, all of that stuff. And as we're going through, we're talking with the parents. So we're noticing things during the evaluation, but we're checking in with them as well to see if this is something they typically see. We understand that it's a snapshot when we're doing an evaluation. So we try to gather as much information from the family as possible. That being said, the family can invite anyone they want to be part of that evaluation. So if you were already involved as a home visitor with the family, and they invited you to participate in that evaluation, there's valuable information you could also share with us, which is helpful in that process for determining eligibility and just kind of giving us a good picture of where the family is and what the child's needs may be. Are there any questions right now regarding that initial evaluation process and what that looks like or how you could participate with us?
Nothing in the chat, Sabrina.
Great, thank you so much. One thing I will highlight as well is that evaluations are free. And as of now, all birth to 3 services and supports are free. There is no longer a family cost participation fee. With Senate Bill 02 that went through in June of this year, which is now a public act, we no longer have a family fee associated. So all services and supports for children in birth to 3 are free at no cost. So how does a child qualify for birth to 3 services? Most often children qualify using the assessment tool that we just discussed, where they're looking at all the areas of development and using a standardized test. So most often we use the Patel Developmental Inventory, which looks at all 5 areas of development. And using that tool, we would look to see if a child had a delay in one area of development or a moderate delay in 2 areas of development. And I would say that's where most children come into our system with that form of eligibility. We also have a comprehensive list of diagnosed conditions which have a high probability of resulting in developmental delay. So children who come in with a diagnosis of Down syndrome or who seizures, epilepsy, those children would automatically be eligible for birth to 3, and we would move right into that assessment process with them and not having to do that standardized test with the family. So that list is on our website. Particular for you guys to know too, we're lowering our the prematurity and low birth weights for auto eligibility. So children going forward as of tomorrow who are born under 32 weeks gestational age would be automatically eligible for birth to 3 and under 1,500 grams. We're changing that to match the DEC best practice, the position paper they put out a couple of years ago. So we're trying to align and be in best practice with that. So we have looked at our own eligibility and matching what the position statement states. The third way to qualify for birth to 3 is around clinical opinion. It's not used very often, but it is there for those instances where, as an evaluator, you see on that standardized test that there's something that's just not being captured, perhaps, or it would have to be modified to a degree that it no longer meets standardization. So we would use a clinical opinion, and it would be a clinical opinion based from the evaluator's perspective, and that eligibility would be valid for 6 months until standardized testing could be completed to either validate that eligibility or the child would not be eligible going forward after that. So those are the three ways that a child would qualify for birth to 3 services. When they're not eligible, what happens? We tell them that they can re-refer up to a month after evaluation. Most families will wait a couple 2 to 3 months, but they can make that referral again after 1 month of the evaluation, up until 45 days before their 3rd birthday. They can have a referral. Sometimes a family may make a referral at 6 months for motor concerns and the child does not qualify. And then they make another referral at 24 months because now they have concerns around communication or something else, social, emotional. So they can make a referral as often as they need to, and at least 1 month after the evaluation. The evaluators, if the child is not eligible for birth to 3 services at the evaluation, are offering the family information on ages and stages, Help Me Grow. And currently we're moving towards offering them information on Sparkler as well, the monitoring app, to get them enrolled that way. We're helping them access resources. So they're not eligible for our program, but there's perhaps programs that we can connect them to, home visiting programs or a childcare setting, if they're looking for a play group, if they're looking for a support group, helping them find those activities or resources of how they can connect and access those. We would help them with that as well. If the child is close to age 3 and not eligible for birth to 3, we want to make sure the family knows what the next steps would be if they have continued concerns after the child turns 3. So they can refer to us, as I said earlier, up to 45 days before they turn 3. We, after that point, that referral would go to their school system. So whatever town they live in, it would go to their preschool program to then determine eligibility for Part B services at that point. The other resources that we would share would be CPAC, Child Parent Advocacy Center. So we like them to know how to, connect with if they have questions about eligibility with Part B or other areas that CPAC can help them with. They offer a lot of parent learning opportunities, webinars and such that we want to make sure the families know how to access that and connect with them as well. So just because they're not eligible for our program, we are still trying to meet their needs and help them how we can before we leave. The families also receive, eligible and not eligible, they would receive a copy of their evaluation report. So they would have that for their records to share with whoever they wanted to, or they would sign a release with us if they wanted us to send that report to their pediatrician or to another program they're involved with. So once they qualify, what are we able to offer? They're listed on your screen. You'll see the types of early intervention supports that we have available to families. But we follow a primary interventionist practice, meaning we try to have one primary provider working with a family, and doing the service coordination of that for that family as well. So coordinating the services that they need, whether it's within birth to 3 or within their medical community, within their moving towards transition to Part B services, all of that would be their primary interventionist, usually the service coordinator. As you can see, the different services and supports available for Part C with SLP, developmental therapists, occupational therapists, all of those team members are available for a family through IDEA. So what does birth to 3 look like? They've qualified, they know what their supports look like, they have a plan with us, they know that they want to work on certain goals, they have goals written, but what does that look like when we go in? In Connecticut, birth to 3 services are based on the following practices. We really focus on the natural learning environment practices. We focus on coaching as a style of interaction with families and team members, and we focus on that primary service provider approach to teaming, which I was just alluding to with that primary interventionist. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into that, but I'm also going to pause again to see if there's any questions before we dive into this piece, if there's any questions around evaluation, around eligibility requirements, or anything along those lines.
I don't see any questions in the chat. And hello,
Excellent.
everyone. Sorry, I had IT issues.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
Perfect. I'll just keep going. Is that all right, Nicole? Or yeah?
Yeah, you are on a roll, so.
Flexibility is what we do. So within those 3 practices that we were just talking about where Connecticut focuses, why we focus on that is that you can see the overlap here with the 3 circles of practices. So our natural learning environment practices, our coaching as a style of interaction, and the primary service provider approach to teaming. And when those overlap there, you see your triangle, and that triangle leads to increased participation, increased confidence, and increased competence in the parent and the child. So the child is who comes into our program with a delay or disability, but we're really focusing on the family as a whole. We're working with them all. And through that coaching style of interaction, we are wanting to build that confidence and competence with the parent to be able to respond to their child, to meet their needs and build skills. So diving a little bit deeper into natural learning environment practices, what does that look like? So most of the time, we think about natural learning environments as a place. So like a home, a childcare setting, grandma's, the park, the library. But when you really get deep into natural learning environment practices, is much more than that. So we're going to look at that a little bit more now and what it means. So natural learning environments are opportunities in everyday family life. It includes working with families in their typical routine. It's starting with an activity and then talking about and brainstorming together all the learning opportunities present in all areas of development. So most families will have a primary concern with their child, but we really want to broaden that view for them of that we can focus on one area of concern, but there's lots of other opportunities there for growth that we can really build and strengthen for the child and the family together. This natural learning environment also will build confidence in the caregiver to be able to use their strategies in different activities. So we may focus on one activity, but they then would be able to find out, oh, I could totally use that over when I'm doing bath time now. So I learned it during mealtime, but that's a great strategy for me to try over here in a different activity. So it's building their competence to know that it's not a single focus, that they can then they can expand where they're using it, how they're using it, who they're using it with. And that is building their confidence as well as their competence. And all of that then leads to skill development and increased participation for the child. So we're starting with the family and building, but it's going back down to that child who started the whole process for the referral with the concerns. So looking at this graphic, you can see where we start. So we're starting with an activity, and then we're looking at the opportunities. So if we think about an activity during a day for a family, such as getting dressed. So getting dressed, that's the activity they do every single day. And we want the family to think about what could they look at? What opportunities are in that activity, and not just around their child's, maybe say the family's concern is not talking. So that's what the family really wants to focus on. That is their priority. They want to start with getting dressed. We talk about what that priority looks like with getting dressed and how to use communication, but then we want to then expand it more about other opportunities as well. So communication-wise, they could point to make a choice for what they want to wear. They can name colors. They can copy silly sounds as they're getting dressed and tickling. But then we're thinking, what else can you do? Well, they have to walk to the bedroom to get dressed. So that's motor domain right there. They're pincing with their fingers to pull their socks on. Fine motor. Where memory. So where do we usually keep your socks? Where do we keep those? Let's go find them. Have it just recall from their memory where they go. Cognitive right there. Personal social, if you're playing peekaboo as they're putting the shirt up and down. So we're wanting the family to start thinking about that your concern is communication, but what else can we also include in that activity that will build a whole, that would focus on all of the domains of development and build from there, but still keeping that desired skill and behavior. So we're still giving them the communication focus, but broadening it a little bit. When we're looking at natural learning environments, they're all these are the pieces that are all related and depend on each other. So we have that big cog with the activity setting and the family routines, and it's kind of driving the learning opportunities that lead to that skill development. But then we have the caregiver responsiveness piece turning as well. And that we're using to build competence through coaching interactions. So we're having the family think about what they're doing to build something. So how are they getting down to their child's level? And we're asking them questions about, why do you think he did that? Or what did you notice when that happened, as they're trying different strategies? And that caregiver responsiveness, as they become more attuned with that and building that skill set, their competence in finding those opportunities grows. And the third cog is that child interest, which we know is critical for learning. Children like what they like. Simple as that. I may want them to color. They don't want to color. They want to go pop something over on the pop bubbles somewhere. Me trying to get them to color with me is not going to get me very far versus me joining where they are, how we can build and make that activity of what they're interested in to meet the needs of what we're working on and focusing on. So all of those three pieces turning together are what drive natural learning environment practice for us. So what research shows of how children learn, we know they learn in everyday activities, routines, and with family and community life. So it's all tied together. All of those things are what children, it's why we're in their homes. It's why we're in the community. It's why we talk about activities. It's why we talk about what is your day like? What are the routines? Who's involved with your child? Where do you go? Who is your support system? All of those pieces are critical for how children learn and how to support a family in meeting those needs as well. We know that learning requires engagement. Again, going back to that child interest, The amount of time a child spends interacting appropriately with their environment, that's when they're engaged. We know that when the more a child is engaged, the more positive the outcomes will be in areas such as like behavior or communication, problem solving. The longer they stay with something, the more opportunities there are for growth in that. So if they're interested and engaged, they'll stay for 2 or 3 minutes. So what else can we do while they're there? How can we expand that activity to get more development going? We also know that children learn through incredible amounts of practice. So practice is needed, but we want practice to not feel like practice, right? So when a child is learning to walk, we're not putting them in one spot and just walking back and forth. They're walking and practicing because they're walking to get up and walk to the high chair for lunch. They're walking to go check the mail with mom. They're walking to go get the toy that's across the room. They're walking to chase the dog. They're walking to go drop their bottle rolled across. They're walking to get their bottle. They're practicing every time they walk without really knowing they're practicing that skill. What we know is that the amount of the toddlers, the more they walk, as that is the only predictor of their improved proficiency of walking. So the more they do it, the better they are, which makes sense. Linda Bamonte, who's a team member of us, tells the story great. I will not do it justice. But when you think about walking, toddlers practice walking for more than 6 hours a day. 6 hours. And that averages 500 to 1,500 steps per hour. A toddler does more walking than me sometimes. So for an hour, 1,500 steps per hour, which is 9,000 steps per day on those little tiny legs, which is the length of 29 football fields. They're practicing. They're practicing walking without really knowing. So what we're helping a family learn and think about is that practice within what they're doing. So this is a walking piece, but what else could you practice in different things that you're not necessarily practicing? If you're wanting a child to talk, we're not sitting down with them to do drill work for cat, kitty, meow. We're talking about the things we see when we go on a walk. Oh, there's a cat, and how we can expand on that practice piece there. It's a critical way to learn, and that's really what we want families to understand of why we're trying to show this whole routine piece and putting it into their day already. The more a child practices, the more they will master a skill. So mastery occurs through frequent repetition of skills and naturally occurring, developmentally appropriate activities across various settings. We want them to practice skills across activities. So we're not only walking at one time of the day, we're walking throughout the day. We're not only practicing feeding ourselves at breakfast, we're going to practice feeding ourselves at breakfast and at snack time. And maybe feeding our kid's brother, or practice feeding the baby doll. All of those practicing within our routine, a natural learning routine, but across different settings. So we're doing it at home. We're practicing at grandma's house. We're practicing it at the park. We're practicing it at childcare center. We're practicing it with mom, but we're also practicing it with dad and our brother and grandma and our childcare provider and the lady at the church that sits next to us. So having all of those various people and places involved, that's where mastery will occur. The best opportunities for success with natural learning environments. So what does it mean? It increases caregiver confidence. And the activities happen all day, every day during the family's regular activities. It's not giving them something extra to do. It's already there. Natural learning environments is not therapy. We're not working directly with a child because that 1 hour that we're there in the grand scheme of things is very little in what the family does with them. There's a great picture that I've seen before of a bowl of white M&Ms, 24 M&Ms in a bowl for an hour. And my one green M&M gets thrown in of the amount of time that of what my impact on a child would be versus what the impact of the family would be in that. So it's not therapy. We're trying to show the family strategies they can use when we're not there within their activities they're already doing. And these activities lead to those learning opportunities, which then lead to skill development. we're still giving them strategies to build skill, but we're starting with the activity, which then leads to those opportunities, which then can focus on the skill development. It's not starting with that skill and then putting it into a routine. So we're starting with, it's time to eat. We have to walk to the high chair. How are we going to get there? Versus we need to learn to walk. So now let's see how we can make walking part of that piece. So it's just changing our mindset, changing the framework with how we think about building skills. Questions about that?
I don't see anything in the chat.
Great. So the second practice in Birth to 3 that we follow is coaching as a style of interaction. Oftentimes you'll hear the coaching model. Coaching is not a model. It's an interaction, a style of interaction. It's your bedside manner, how we work with a family. So I just want to put that piece out there too. That often people will say that we have a coaching model. It's not our model, but it is a practice that we use within our Birth to 3 system. So coaching is not couching. When we first moved into coaching, which I would say we've really been focused on building coaching as a style of interaction and reflective practice with families using activity-based teaming, probably for the past 7 years, Nicole, 8 years-ish?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah. It's been a while.
7.5.
Yeah, it's been a little while, and we've learned a lot over the years, but we've also have heard a lot of the same things over and over of the resistance around coaching. So we wanted to break it down a little bit of what a common myth we hear and what is actually happening, because coaching is not couching. Often people will say we're just going to sit on the couch and talk, but we're doing some more of that. So the myth of it's all talking. There is some talking. There's a lot of talking. But the emphasis is on action and practice during the visit. So we're talking about how we can then practice it. That's the coaching piece. We may be sitting on the couch while we do it, maybe not, but it's different. Another popular myth is that it's hands-off. I can't touch the child because we're coaching. Only can coach, only talk. Not true. Coaching can be as hands-on as it needs to be. So if you're in a visit and you're discussing with a family some ideas and strategies of something to try during an activity, and the family has questions or they're just not sure what you're trying to share with them, that could be an appropriate time to model for them, which would then be hands-on. But we're checking with them. Would you like me to show you? Okay, great. So when I'm going to do this, I want you to watch what I do. So you're giving the family a job. I want you to watch what happens when I do this. They have their job. We then model. The provider then uses their hands, models possibly what's happening or what we're wanting to happen with that strategy to show the family. And then after that, we're then talking with the family. What did you see? What did you notice? What happened when I did this? What did the child do when that happened? To really start analyzing why we were using that, what worked, what didn't work. Maybe it didn't go the way we wanted it to. Maybe it worked really great. And we got even more information than what we thought we were going to get. And what does that mean? And then we're giving the family a chance to then practice that. So going back to practice for the visit, letting them try it, see how it goes. And we're observing and offering some ideas after they're done. Again, analyzing together, starting with them of what did you notice? How did that feel? What did you think of that when you did it? Did it seem easier than you thought? What was that? And really kind of talking it through. So it can be as hands-on as it needs to be. If a family has a question, we're going to show them. We're not going to talk them through it the whole time. Common myth is that it only works for some families. I have families this will never work with. We hear that often. But coaching is a family-centered practice. Family-centered practice means it will work with everyone. It just may be that you have to find what works for that family, which is that individualized piece and connecting and relating with that family and knowing what they already know. Once you know what they know, then see what they need. But family-centered works with all. Another myth is that the practitioner or the provider cannot share expertise because we're coaching. that we have all this information up here, but we have to keep asking and asking until they can come up with the answer themselves. We do want them we want to give that opportunity for the family to come to the answer themselves, but we want to find out what they already know, what they've already tried, and what their ideas are before sharing that information. Oftentimes the family has much better ideas than I would have ever thought of because I'm not living their life. I haven't been in their home. I don't know what makes things work well in their house. So I'm asking those questions and they come up with a solution, and that's great. And likely more will likely work more or have a better outcome because it's theirs. They own it. They know it. They thought of it themselves. But if they don't and they're struggling and they want something, then we're checking in of like, I have a few ideas. Would you mind if I shared those with you? Get their permission and then move forward. So having that again, relationship with the family of knowing what they know and where they need that support and where we can go from there. So there's several key components of coaching that we follow with Birth to 3 using our activity-based teaming approach that we use. And the first piece is joint planning. So joint planning is critical. It happens at the beginning and end of every visit. So the joint plan being at the end of a visit, we're asking the family. So we talked about a lot of things today. What do you think you want to work on between now and our next visit? And the family comes up with their ideas. They are thinking things through of what seemed to something they want to practice more. They have that. Then we're planning. Okay, so when I come back next time, what do you want to focus on? What activity do you want to focus on for that next visit? And having that there. And then when we come back, we're reviewing that plan. So how did that go? The last time you were going to work on giving her a choice at mealtime versus just letting her go to the refrigerator. How did that go? And the family will tell you how it went. And you're like, so what do you think? What are we going to keep? What do you want to get rid of? What worked well? What didn't? And just kind of editing that plan as you go forward. If it went great, they may not have to work on that anymore and they want to move on to something different. And we're checking in again as well of last time we planned to do bath time today. Is that still good for you? Does that still work? So joint planning is key. It requires a lot of organization on the provider's part to make sure that we have some good notes of what the plan is, and then it keeps everyone focused. Is really helpful. The second component of coaching is observation. So often we want to see what's happening. So the family's having trouble with a certain part of their activity. So would you mind showing me? Let me see. Let me see what that looks like for you. Or say part of their plan from last time between visits was to work on something and they say it worked great. They loved it. Observation. Can you show me? I would love to see that. Let's see how that works. And then after that observation, you're following that up with some feedback or some questions for them and teasing it out a little bit more. Next is action. So we talked about action with the parent before and letting them practice. Practice is key. So it's not all talking. We may be talking about some strategies to try, but then we're giving them an opportunity to practice within that visit so they have a chance to analyze it and ask questions while we're there brainstorming together. It could even be that action from when if I modeled for the family, now they're having a turn to try it, that practice there as well for action. A lot of questions, so reflective questions, which are really, again, we're wanting to know what the family already knows, what they've tried. So we're asking them to analyze what they see. How did that compare to what you typically see when he's eating? Why do you think he's choosing to do that? Or what do you think was the trigger for that? Asking those questions for the family to start analyzing what they're noticing and seeing and thinking things through. Or what can we try next time when he does this? Those are the questions that we work on with the family. It is a balance. We don't want them to feel like they're being hit with a lot of questions or interrogation, but questions to really get them thinking about what they're seeing and noticing and what the next steps would be. And we're giving feedback. Feedback is important. We all love feedback of what's working and what's not working and what we're seeing, whether it's agreeing with them, whether it's evaluating. So that was great. I liked what I saw there. That seemed to really work. Or informative feedback. So if a family is really looking for information, sharing that with them but we've already asked that question of what do they already know? What have you already tried? What are your thoughts about that? So checking in with that before we then share that information. And if we do share information, following that up with a question of what are your thoughts about trying that? Or what are your thoughts about that? To make sure there's some understanding and that it's not all just sharing information, that there's a dialogue between the two. Any questions about coaching as a style of interaction?
So we have a couple of questions in the chat.
Sure.
One is, how early is too early to identify developmental delay?
Never too early. If there are concerns, I say make that referral. So it depends on, we're using standardized testing. So sometimes standardized testing typically does not look at quality, right? So we're looking at if they do it or don't do it. So the qualitative part of it is tricky in kids, especially younger versus older. But if there's a concern, I would say it's never too early to make the referral. It at the very least gives a baseline of where the child is at that point to know if that another referral is coming or if the concern continues, it gives you a baseline to compare for where the progress they've made or haven't made, which would then look at that qualitative piece as well. But depending on the area of concern, they may or may not qualify. And just knowing that going in, I think it's just something to hold, but I would never say wait if you have concerns.
Awesome. And the second being, how difficult or not is it for families to change their mindset with doing things throughout their activity?
That's a great question. That's a wonderful question. So I think it depends on the family. And again, I think it goes back to that relationship of explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it, and having that dialogue with them of what they're looking for and how can I support you. And really, they're the driver of what we're doing. They know their child best. They know their family routines best. I could come in and probably was very guilty of this 20 years ago when I started of saying, I want you to do this. This is what I think you should do. Not knowing what their family situation was like, that likely didn't work because what worked for me or what I thought would work, not having lived in that, walked in their shoes, not having kids at that point in time. There's a lot of things that I probably would cringe often about now. But I think if we're patient and we walk with the family together with that, building that relationship of trust and listening and actively listening. So hearing what they're saying, knowing what's important to them, checking in on what their values are, what their family culture is what they expect to happen. What I expect mealtime to look like may not be what they expect it to look like. So knowing that, asking that question, what do you want this to look like? I think goes a long way with changing a mindset of it's not therapy. And once they have that aha moment of like, wow, that worked, you have the buy-in. But sometimes it takes a little bit longer with some families than others. And I think it's really important for things like what we're doing right here today, is sharing this information with other community providers as well of what we do, so that when a family has a question, they're hearing the same thing from their community worker as well as what we would share with them from birth to 3. Not sure if that completely answered your question, but it can be challenging with the mindset for what they're expecting therapy or what birth to 3 would look like is changing. It's a work in progress for sure.
And then the third being, how long do you typically work with families? And on average, families stay in the program about 10.5 months.
So how long for like a visit? Is that the kind of question?
Maybe.
Or I don't know, but yeah.
I took it as how long do they stay in, but visits to
yeah. I would say so. Yeah, that's what Nicole just shared about how long they're typically in. Yes. Visits can vary. So I would say anywhere from a half an hour. Probably the average is an hour a visit, but some visits could be an hour and a half. For children who are receiving supports with autism, around autism, may have longer blocks of time with breaks built into that time of how they're working and supporting the family through that. So that definitely varies, I would say.
And I just see another one that just came in. Speaking of autism, how early can a possible autism be assessed? Autism diagnosis.
So we're screening for autism with the MCHAT at 16 months and older. I don't know. I don't have any statistics off my head right now to know, but there have been children that young, just anecdotally, that have been diagnosed as meeting the criteria for a diagnosis of autism at around that 17 to 18 month of age. But I'm not sure, Nicole, if there's anything you would know off the top of your head. But that's something that we could probably find.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that data in a while and pertaining to Connecticut, but it's definitely something I can follow up on and see what the average age of identification for autism diagnosis would be within our system.
Yeah. Those are great questions. Others, or that was it?
That was it so far.
Okay. So now I'll jump into the last area of practice for birth to 3, and that's the primary service provider, which I touched on towards the beginning around the supports that we offer, in that our service coordinator is typically the primary interventionist. So the practice from Connecticut Birth to 3 is the primary service provider, you'll hear PSP, approach to teaming. And what is that? So the misconception is that the primary service provider means that there's only one interventionist, and that, while not incorrect, is misleading in that every family has a full team. It's just that there's typically one person, one primary person leading that support. So every child, every family has a full team. You may be working with your primary provider as a social worker, but that social worker is meeting with her full team. So she's meeting with a speech therapist, she's meeting with the OT, she's meeting with the PT, she's meeting with the BCBA, she's meeting with a developmental therapist or the nutritionist. She has a full team available as needed if something comes up that she needs support with for a case that she's the primary provider for. That one interventionist functions as a primary support for the family. So they're the person, they're that primary contact. They're coordinating the services, they're the person to call, they're doing all of the meetings, they're handling the paperwork, they're scheduling the transition meeting with schools, they're their person. And this approach, it strengthens the parents' confidence and competence in promoting child learning. They know who to go to. They have one person telling them one thing, one person to kind of brainstorm with and build that, again, relationship. And trusting, caring relationship is huge. And this approach supports the parents' competence in obtaining desired supports and resources. So having one person who knows your story is easier to ask those questions, to connect with, to know what they may need, versus if you tell me something that you need, and then you tell Nicole something that you need, and then you tell Linda something that you need. Now we have 3 people working where it gets a little less, it gets more disjointed and likely less helpful for the family. So we have our team, but we have our primary person. So those teams are meeting weekly, recommended hopefully, but at least on a regular basis, so that they are able to come together around the cases they have to look for support, to ask questions. And it could be that they're sharing what they've seen with a visit, but we're coaching. So we're still coaching with the parent, we're still coaching with other caregivers, and we're coaching with other team members as well. So every interaction that we're using when we're having those meetings, we're still using coaching as our style of interaction when we're discussing families and cases. The teams provide supports within the natural learning environments and opportunities for a family. And it could be that other team members may join you on a visit. So if needed, so you have your primary person, but you need support, that person can join you. But that person joining you is supporting me. So if they're coming with me because I need help with, positioning for sitting in a high chair and the PT's coming with me, they're coaching me as they're using that coaching there. So it's a different mindset, again, a framework of how we're approaching supporting that family. When we're picking that person who's going to be, it's made by the whole team and including the parent. And it's really based on a lot of factors, the family, the child, where it's going to be, and the practitioner. So if I've worked with a family before, I may be at the head of the line there for who would be the primary provider going forward, just because I already have that relationship with them. However, if there was something else that was outside of my scope or outside of my expertise, it could be that maybe I wouldn't then be the primary provider. It could, or I may be that person, but I'm definitely going to need more joint visits from someone who has that expertise to help me and to build my confidence and competence as well in supporting the family. What we found with the primary service provider is that 96% of families with one provider rated that person helpful. And then it drops when there's two people. So 77% of the time, parents with two providers rated them as helpful. And when there were three or more, only 69% of the time did parents find it helpful. So it's really showing that having that one person to go to and one person to provide direct support has been super helpful for families. So in birth to three, we have our three practices that we've talked a little bit about today, and that the main thing I want to leave you with is that every family, every child has a team. We're a team, including the parents working together, looking at their routines, looking at their child, their learning opportunities, and how to support them and their child. I'm just leaving you with our website. Our website is loaded with lots of great information because I threw a lot of information at you today, but it's also on the website if you wanted to explore or point your families to as well. There's resources for families as well as the different programs by town, so you would know which programs are in certain towns if you were looking to make a referral as well. Any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see people.
So there are two questions that
Okay.
I see. What is your approach to responding to families who are inconsistently engaged?
It's a great question because we all have them, right? I think it's just life. I would start with checking in with the family of what's helpful for them. What are they finding helpful? Again, checking with the services that we have and supports we have listed. Maybe that was what they thought they needed and wanted, but is no longer really appropriate. And letting them know it's a voluntary service. We're not having to do this. So if you feel like this is not helpful, what would be helpful? And again, that relationship aspect of the work that we do, all of us here on this call really, is so important, and just highlights having those real conversations with the family. If it's not working, how can we make it work? What do I need to change? How can I, move forward and help you?
Awesome. And then I just lost it because more chats came in and now I can't find where that last one was. There was a question about sharing the PowerPoint. I can send it over to Ashley so that she can send it out to you all. And then I see another question, and I think this is a deeper dive, but how can home visitors collaborate best with birth to three? I think us having this presentation so you understand the baseline of birth to three, I think it's the start of many conversations, and Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the beginning of a great collaboration that we'll have, and we'll dive deeper into that as we move on.
You are correct.
We love collaborating, so.
And I'm also going to put in the chat Sabrina and my email addresses. That way there, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us and we can answer them. And I see a couple more coming in. I know, Ashley, you were just about to say something. What we can do is I can take all of the questions that we didn't answer and put a little FAQ together. A lot of the questions can be also answered on our website if you go and explore. There's some about timelines that's in our data reports. You can find that there. So.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for coming to, our finale of orientation. We really hope everybody found this to be super helpful. And like Nicole said, my goal is to really bridge birth to 3 and home visiting over the course of however long it takes. And Nicole and I are very much in conversation about how to best do that moving forward. So again, we thank you all for your time over the past 4 weeks, and we appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting, provider meeting, which will not be until November. You are getting a break for October. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a nice weekend, even though I know it's Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.